Hello and welcome back to the Sarpedon campaign Abridged. In the previous part we sailed out to capture some islands. This turned into a bit of a back and forth because we lost them again to various factions. Now at the current time we occupy all the islands we need for the Annex of Road mission that I was doing, plus one extra island which is out in this other province, and being there made me think that since I've gone out here to take this island, maybe we should actually take this island province as well by taking the other islands nearby. One of the islands in the province though is owned by a faction that appears to have some presence on the mainland, so that would be more of a big deal being at war with them. I didn't really want to stray so far from the actual objective, so didn't really want to do that, but the faction controlling 2 of the 4 islands is diplomatically isolated. So I figured since I'm here, I'll take most of the province and then I'll go back to my home territory where our mission objective basically is. But the faction that owned these islands here previously was less dead than I thought, and they're back. I thought their army would disappear because I took all their territory, which does happen in some total wars. In this one they just take attrition, and not very much, way less attrition than the siege attrition we've seen so far. They're also not willing to not attack me, very unwilling, and indeed in their turn they capture this island back. So that's inconvenient, but of course I already had my army on the way here, and it arrives in my next turn, giving me that balance bar, so I thought, well, we'll just kill them, and that will be the end of that. The auto-resolve was worse than I thought it would be for that balance bar. We lost 3 units, which is quite surprising, 2 giant units. Could be the Total War Warhammer effect, where auto-resolves tend to kill units that have small numbers in them, even if they're at max strength, like trolls and things that used to always be. So that's annoying. As it happens, we can re-recruit giants right here, so at least we can get them back instantly. And with that all done, I'm going to go ahead with my plan to attack those islands up to the northwest, and on the way there, a perfect opportunity shows its head. It looks like their army is in the sea next to Manoa here. They're actually going after that other army that's standing in my territory suspiciously. I'm guessing that army's just running away. They belong to a faction we can't see, but the diplomacy screen implies it's a bunch of islands off to the west. So here, we can go after their fleet in the sea and just take them out with overwhelming numbers. Plus we can do this. We can get that other faction to buy us into the war, because clearly they're on the back foot. So we get paid to help them, then we sail forwards, attack their army. It's got like 2 pixels on the balance bar because it was just a not full stack of trash against our stack and a half containing good units. Down they go with no trouble whatsoever, and that's a great start to the war. Now we'll just plough on to see what we can do against their territory. But later in the turn, I was looking around for something to build and happened to notice something that normally would have gone completely under my radar. They actually have another territory down here on Crete, so need to do something about that in case they build an army and attack our territories here. We're way too far away to do anything if they did that. That means we need to make an army here, a small army since we can't afford too much. Have the option there to have a commander with negative motivation. Not quite sure what that does. Probably something bad, so we're going to have to find someone else. Someone who likes being garrisoned as well. Anyway, back up at the front lines. I'm going to besiege their capital here, but I can't just auto-resolve it like I thought, because it has a max level garrison building. That means it has a full stack of relatively good troops, plus the walls. So a difficult place to attack. I thought I'll just siege them out and take advantage of that 50% siege attrition by letting them die off. Here's an example of one of the many barter deals I've done recently by essentially selling non-aggression pacts and military access. You can make enormous amounts of resources, and that's because the AI factions don't spend their resources, so they tend to have absolutely loads of them. And that makes them very willing to give them away in exchange for basically nothing, so I've been getting rich through that method. And as you can see, there actually was some action down on Crete. They did have a small army down in that random territory, and they're trying to attack us with it. But our garrison here, while not being a very good garrison, it's good enough to face off against this terrible army they're attacking with at least. I won't bother with the replay for this one, since it was a pretty short and simple battle as it turns out. They all came in a big blob down a single path, so I can just block that path to the capture point, and then once they blob up in front of me, have other units go around other paths and do some outflanking stuff. Because all these units attacking are militia, they're going to be vulnerable to morale shocks. So we come in, hit them with some jabs on the flank and then with our infantry, and 30 seconds later the battle's effectively over. They all rout in a big blob, and now they're routing while sort of surrounded, and we see the thing again where we really want to kill them as soon as possible. But they have a tendency to just sort of somehow survive on the way out, and this really sucks. The battle's not actually over because we have to send some guys to go kill their general, but we can overwhelm him with everything, including my general, to win. But check out their health bars just there and compare it to them just here. Even though they routed while surrounded and we chased them off the field, they just didn't die. So a classic example of what's frustrating about the battles in this game. You just can't finish them off. You can only kill them while they're not routing, and then they become 100 times stronger afterwards. Very strange. So because they're still alive, they can go back to their territory, recruit more stuff, and replenish. And ultimately that hasn't settled things over there at all. They've also got one guy, by the looks of things, sneaking down near our siege. But at that siege, after that huge 50% attrition, the balance bar was super far in our favour, so we just auto-resolved them, and that's all fine then. Their capital is taken, and surely their faction is doomed. I'm also going to go out and fight that one guy. Doesn't really matter, but killing a general is nice because the generals cost a fair bit to recruit. Although actually killing a general also reduces their logistical overreach debuff or something. There's a debuff you get for having more than one general active, which reduces all of your resource production. So that might actually save them some money, I don't know. The main point is that after all that, the faction we originally got that bribe off to join the war took their other territory, so I'm not going to be able to get it myself. I was sufficiently annoyed by this that I apparently without hesitation just declared war on them to still go after that territory. So now we're going further and further away from my original goal, which is to go back to our home territory. We're going after this other faction now apparently. But at least this first battle is going to be super easy, because they only had a small force capturing this place, or perhaps a small remnant of whatever they sent to capture this place. I moved over both of my armies in the area, auto-resolve them for free, and that's that. But of course, that's not going to be the end of this war. Now we have to go to war with whatever they have, which we don't know very much about, we just know they're somewhere to the left. So we're going to sail out over there, and end up very far from my objective, but that's just what's happening right now. With my army on Crete, I built up a decent amount of stuff, and I wondered whether I could go and take out their settlement. The problem is they've also spammed a bunch of units. This is their only region now, and because factions that just have one territory will get enough money to have a full stack to defend it, because all factions get a certain background income, it means it's going to be very hard for us to finish them off with just this force, especially because their garrison will be of similar size to us and have better units. So if they had no actual army, we might be able to take them down. With their army there, we almost certainly can't. Seeing that, I decided to move backwards and try an ambush strategy to see if this would get anywhere. They actually did come out, but the ambush failed, so it turns into a normal battle. And we don't really want to fight this, because even if we win, the losses will be too great for us to take their settlement, and ultimately nothing will happen. So I thought let's just fall back. However, they did pursue, so we end up forced into this fight. They've just spammed a bunch of militia clubmen and trash spears. It's a shame we're not fighting at our settlement, then we'd certainly have an advantage. Here we're going to have to take this balanced fight. We get a pretty interesting map, which is great. We've got this valley with cliffs on either side, so I thought I'd try and use this. I put my javs on top of the cliffs overlooking where the main fight will happen, and also a couple of units up here to just generally guard them, since the enemy can walk around and come up here. We've also got this avenue next to the cliffs that's hidden, so I'm advancing some axes through this hidden area. The enemy are doing the same thing, so good work from the AI trying to remain hidden. They're just going to end up walking into each other by the looks of things. The only issue with this plan is it didn't do anything as it turns out, because in this game it's one of the Total Wars where being at a height advantage doesn't do anything for ranged units. You don't get any extra range or power or anything like that. So it just means our javs are kind of far away from the fight and can't participate very well, so didn't really work out. And they did send quite a few things to come around up here, meaning my axe unit now has to hold off quite a lot of stuff to stop the javs going into melee. My hero's going to walk through the front line battle here, because I've just got him targeted onto the enemy hero. Going to try and kill that archer general with our melee general. That should work out. Now it ends up being our javs taking on pretty much everything up here and just seeing what they can do. The axes here will buy them some time, but they're not going to be able to take down this overwhelming amount of trash, because even our two-handed axemen are nearly trash themselves. Also, our regular axe troops are trash, as you can see here, because we actually lose some of our melee fights to the enemy militia. I figured these militia were worse than my axe troops. They're actually better after I checked the stats. They just look worse. It's a little confusing because your guys kind of look like they're geared up as actual soldiers, but they do have lower combat stats than the guys with no clothes and a short wooden stick. So that's a shame. Plus we're playing on hard difficulty, which messes up the stats in an unspecified way, so you don't really know what the stats of the enemy units are. Our hero's getting to work against their hero, so that's coming along nicely at least. And now the chariots get into the fight. We probably would lose this fight if it wasn't for the fact I could use these chariots to slam into enemy units and rout them, and then as they start running away, grab some extra kills to reduce the chance of them coming back from routing. And in this fashion, these chariots are going to gradually shatter like 5 units over here. That's going to be handy. We've also got some nice sacrificial jab strategies going on, where one unit dies to buy time for the other units to throw into the enemy blob. So that's a nice efficient way to get rid of your jabs and kill a bunch of enemies. It ultimately failed though. We saw a lot of routs in the area and this group was just annihilated. But the enemy are on the verge of routing as well. We still have an advantage on the balance bar. Pretty much everything across the field is routing, actually looking around. We've even got here some of our units in combat with a routing unit. Not sure if that's a glitch or something. Either they're not actually routing or they're managing to fight while routing. Normally you can't fight back if routing, let alone actually be winning the fight. They are taking us down a notch. As I mentioned, our axe warriors aren't better than the enemy's militia. They do have more armor, a little bit anyway, but not sure what effect that has on the actual outcome of combat because that remains a mystery. At least we did kill their commander in the background, and with most of their stuff being militia, that's probably going to have a big effect on their morale. Unfortunately, another unit came back from routing over here in the forests and took out my guys back here, so we did end up losing our fight against the enemy routers, unfortunately. So it's getting worse and worse, my complaints about fighting routing things apparently. But at least in this battle, because we have the chariots, we're going to be able to clear things up. Absolutely everything is routing all over the field in all directions, but our chariots aren't, so they're going to just start slaughtering enemies as they run off the field. And I did play through the rout phase even after everything was routing to make sure we got kills, because I noticed it tends to leave everything alive if you just end the battle prematurely. So we get to this final result. Only a Cadmean victory, the equivalent of a Pyrrhic victory. We didn't lose any units, and our army kind of looks healthy after all that. Their army also looks quite healthy, and that's because of the disconnect between health and man count that I've ranted about before. It's because if you're chasing a routing unit off the field, generally you're just reducing their health, and only at the very end do you reduce their man count. But the red bar on the campaign map is your man count, whereas the red bar in battles is your health. And that confusion means that, generally speaking, you kill less than it looks like you're killing in a battle, and stuff ends up looking more alive. The same applies to our army. It looks kind of alive, despite some units being killed basically down to the last man, according to their health bar. Their unit models were actually alive. They were just scattered around the place and on basically no health. And then that health gets restored on the campaign map and we're fine again. So that's handy, I suppose. It benefits all factions, but it's still kind of annoying. So we're going to build up some more stuff here. Looks like we'll need a much better army to actually finish off the war on Crete. We can get this special recruitment option to grab some giants as well. That's pretty nice. Moving back to our main force, we've gone over to the west and captured the first of the territories we're now at war with. Just some little islands with basically nothing on it. So that's a free win. And from here, there are 2 more territories we'll need to go for. You can see one up to the north there, and their other one, their main one, is to the south. It's a bit awkward having to go in 2 different directions. I started thinking, since we have 2 armies, maybe we can go after both separately. So what I'm going to do here is have the main force get out of the town and sit in the sea, ready to sail off towards that capital down there next turn. The other army is going to grab a couple more units, since we can recruit harpies here, and get strong enough to go after the other place on its own. That was the plan anyway, until the start of the next turn, when we saw the enemy do have another force that's marauding about, and it's just landed off to the east. So because of that, our secondary army will go back to deal with that. As it happens, we can actually get into the docks over there this turn, meaning we're pretty safe. These guys on top of the garrison should be able to deal with that incomplete enemy army. And now we'll just wait and see what happens. Plus, in this territory, I've now built a recruitment building so I can recruit some real units into this army while they're here. So that all worked out. As for the main force, we go for their capital, but again it's got the max level garrison building, so it's heavily defended, but it also only has 1 turn of supplies for some reason, so a perfect opportunity to go for the siege attrition plan. I've also grabbed this envoy who's going to go into our second army to reduce their upkeep, because we are tanking money at the moment. I've got more stuff than we can afford since we're fighting these different wars on different fronts at the same time. And here's another war for us. Someone I haven't discovered yet by the looks of things, declares war on us. Obviously we don't really know why this has happened or what's going on here. We're going to have to just accept it. I think they're just in the fog of war up the mainland somewhere. The nice thing is that I'm now allied to Hector of Troy, and I'm going to call them into this war. Hector of Troy is a super strong faction, and they're probably closer to these guys. So my hope is that they'll deal with that, and they won't come down here and invade our islands. Obviously we can't see if they're going to do that, so it could happen at any time. Just going to be a background risk. We take out the force on that island that was back to the east with an easy auto-resolve that really annoyingly kills some trash, which I guess is okay, but also my good giant unit. I really wish the auto-resolve wouldn't prioritize killing your best small units like that and just leaving everything else alive. Pretty annoying. Seem to remember Warhammer had this big issue. Not sure if they ever solved it since I haven't played it vanilla for so long. Anyway, in the next enemy turn, there's more action back down on Crete. They've continued expanding their army, or at least they've got their army back to how it was before, I should say, after we killed it. And then they make this attack. This should be fine, but you can see our army's kind of a bit dead, and our garrison seems to be suspiciously half dead in a very precise sort of way. What's happened here is this game has the same thing as Rome 2 used to have, where the spies have a poison action that just kills a proportion of the force you use it against, and that's extremely powerful. So that's going to be the new meta of the campaign. Basically, we need to grab some spies at some point because they have just killed nearly half of our troops before the fight starts, and then they can make this attack a balanced engagement. Pretty inconvenient. So we're going to have to take this fight right now, and this is where I was actually comparing the stats and noted that the militia have quite a lot more melee defense than our axemen. Our axemen are advertised as having good attack. Well, they have the same attack as the enemy's trash militia, so clearly it's not that good, and the militia have poor attack according to their stat highlight thing at the top. Overall, I think our guys might actually suck, and this might be an accident as well. Maybe they're meant to be balanced to be better, but they're worse, so we're just going to have to deal with that in our strategies. They're attacking at multiple points this time. One of the entrances to the town is open right now though. We're going to use that chance to get the chariots outside where they'll be more useful. So we've got a couple of blobs coming in and we're just going to try and stop them. Obviously these are the fights we don't really want to be taking, but we just have to. We've got 4 or 5 units of their militia against an already damaged unit of our axe troops. We know that's not going to go very well, but that's what we've got. Over here at the north end of town, things are a bit better because I've got some garrison slingers who can shoot into the enemy big blobs and damage them while they're distracted trying to break through. Also got my hero to go through and attack the enemy hero. Over here things aren't quite so good. I've got these axemen holding up an enemy blob while jabs throw into it. This is a bit better than nothing, but the jabs unfortunately aren't going to be doing enough against the enemy's numbers to clear things up there, so our troops will gradually die. Here's our main play though. The chariots, once outside the town, can ram their way into the back of the blobs, and that looks especially juicy. It's much less powerful than it looks in terms of doing damage, but it does cause a massive morale shock, and this entire blob routs. That's what we like to see. Now, of course, we can use the chariots to chase the routing units, so while they didn't really die, they eventually will die as the chariots continually run them over. As long as we micro the attacks on them, they won't come back from routing, and that's an entire front cleared up. Good stuff. Here the enemy are coming around my defences while I wasn't paying attention. I think at the very last second I turned around to stop them from getting to the capture point. Back in the north, well, it's just a grind. Everything's dying, especially our troops. We're using the jabs here in melee. I had some giants here that I threw into the fight. I think that was a bad idea though, because I realised in retrospect that the enemy's trash spears might have a bonus against large thing going on, which makes them do more damage to giants. So even though I thought my armoured giant unit would annihilate them, it may have just gone the other way. Whatever the case, they're dead now and the enemy are still coming. Our hero is doing okay against the enemy hero, and it looks like we're heading towards a win there, which is sorely needed. Here was a nice rear attack on one of the other enemy blobs, not as good as with chariots, but the two-handed axemen in theory are classified as a charging unit. They don't appear to do very much with their charge. Now that they're in there, we'll just let them hack and hopefully this will go okay. That's about the best we can do. If they weren't there, we'd certainly lose, so it was a good play. We're starting to edge out that balance bar and get an advantage, so something is going well. Over here, while the enemy broke through quite a lot and started surrounding all of our stuff, I moved all of my ranged units to the side, and luckily the enemy didn't notice them, or didn't go towards them I should say. So, we can now rain slinger stones and jabs into the blob once again. This is less effective than it looks, because you can see if you look closely that even guys with no armor can take a jab through the chest and just shake it off. That's the health system coming in again. Handy for the enemy I suppose, but it's still going to be damaging them over time, just less than it looks like it will. We take out the enemy hero and we immediately see some routes at the south end of town, and broadly speaking these fights are now won. Our chariots are still busy killing routing units, so they're not really helping at this stage. But we're able to win the northern fight because they chain route due to army losses, giving me one more chance to rant about not being able to damage routing units. Here you can see a unit routing from two different directions, two units I should say, routing from two directions into one of mine. And when you look up close, your men really don't attack routing units. I keep thinking, am I crazy? Am I the only one who's noticed this? Because I feel like no one's ranting about it except me. But yeah, looks like the enemy are just kind of janking their way through and being alive. We're probably even killing our own men because our jabs are firing at will into this. Broadly speaking, this annoys me, and I think the battles in this game are probably the worst for me in the Total War series. I really don't like that routing factor and the fact the battles are really fast and weirdly balanced. Anyway, we take the win, and this time we actually annihilated their army because my chariots were going around killing them. I didn't show it there, but I played all of the rout phase and had the chariots kill everything. So the enemy lost the vast majority of their force. They won't be able to instantly replenish or anything like that. This means we're in the ideal situation for a counterattack. It's not going to get better than this. If we let them sit in their settlement, they'll just make that army again, so we have to attack them now. Unfortunately, their garrison gives them a balanced setup here, but they only have one turn of supplies, so I was happy to lay siege, and laying siege stops them from re-recruiting, and that's perhaps the most important thing. Back north, we're going to rush up with our secondary army, now slightly reinforced with some good units, to attack this settlement up here. There is a general there, and it will have a garrison of comparable size, so that may be something of a challenge. We'll see what happens. What happens next, though, is we get a sally down on Crete. My plan to just kill them with that 50% siege attrition isn't going to happen because it's turning into a field battle instead. So we'll start the next part with this engagement. We either win and this fight will be over, or we lose and we'll be back to where we were before. Effectively, we'll just have to make more troops and continue the grind. May need to eventually bring someone down to help out with this if that's the case, but we'll see. Why don't you join me for part 4?